The burned SEAL's massive hand shot out and grabbed the paramedic's wrist. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, a 23-year-old rookie firefighter pushed through the crowd, crouched down, and whispered 4 words into the man's ear. And the most dangerous patient anyone at that scene had ever seen went completely, utterly still. What those 4 words were, why only she knew them, and what it cost her to say them out loud. That is the story you are about to hear. Nobody at Station 14 would have called Maya Reyes a prodigy. She was quiet. She kept her gear squared away, she did her chores without being asked, and she never once bragged about anything. The veterans called her Ghost, not as a compliment. It was the kind of nickname that means you are there, but nobody really sees you. She had been with the crew for 7 months. She had run 14 calls. She had done everything right and nothing memorable, and in the world of the Sacramento City Fire Department, that was about the most invisible a person could be. Captain Dennis Holt had almost not hired her. He had looked at her application and seen the gaps, 2 years unaccounted for, references that went nowhere, a college degree in emergency medicine she had apparently never used, and he had called her into his office and asked her directly what she had been doing. She had looked him straight in the eye and said she had been traveling. That was it. Traveling. He had almost laughed her out of the building. He hired her anyway because her physical scores were off the charts and he was short-staffed, and frankly, she was the only applicant who hadn't flinched when he described the graveyard rotation. He would spend a long time thinking about that decision later. October 14th started as a nothing day. A brush fire on the eastern edge of the district, small and manageable, the kind that burns itself out before you fully deploy. Maya was on the truck. She rode in the back next to Dominic Farrell, a 10-year veteran who had the kind of institutional confidence that comes from having seen everything twice. He spent the ride describing in unnecessary detail a call from the previous week. Maya listened. She nodded. She watched the smoke column in the distance and said nothing. They arrived at 0947. The brush fire had reached a structure, not a house, a warehouse at the edge of an industrial lot, the kind of building that has no reason to be beautiful and isn't. But there was a vehicle in front of it, a blacked-out government-plate SUV with all 4 doors open, and there were 2 men in civilian clothes who were very clearly not civilians, standing 50 feet back from the building, and one of them had a radio pressed to his ear and was talking very fast and very quietly. And then there was the man on the ground. He was on his back, 10 feet from the warehouse entrance, and he was burned. Not superficially. Not the kind of burns that look terrible but behave themselves. His left arm from the shoulder to the elbow was full thickness, the skin gone or going, the underlying tissue angry and dark. His shirt had fused to his chest in at least 3 places. His face was clean, which told you the fire had caught him from the side, and he was conscious. That was the most alarming thing. A person with those injuries being conscious was not a good sign. It meant a level of pain tolerance that no ordinary human being should have. The lead paramedic, a 12-year veteran named Sandra Chu, went straight to him with her kit. He grabbed her wrist before she could kneel, not aggressively, not panicked, with absolute precision. He located her wrist, he closed his hand around it, and he held it still. His eyes were open and they were tracking, and they were not the eyes of a man in shock. They were calculating. Sandra said his name. She didn't know his name. She said, "Sir," which is what you say. And he said one word. No. Flat. Final. Like a door being shut. Sandra looked at the 2 men in civilian clothes. One of them raised a hand and shook his head slightly. Don't. Dominic moved in from the left side, talking in his 10-year veteran voice, low and calm and authoritative, and the man on the ground shifted his entire body orientation without releasing Sandra's wrist, putting himself at an angle where he could see Dominic coming, and Dominic stopped walking, because something in the shift communicated very clearly that this was a man who, even at approximately 40% burns to his upper body, could and would remove Dominic from the equation if required. Captain Holt was on his radio. The 2 civilians were on their radios. Everyone had a radio and no one had any answers. It had been 4 minutes since they arrived. 4 minutes is a long time to let full-thickness burns progress without intervention. Maya was standing at the rear of the truck, looking at the scene. She had not moved forward. She had not reached for her kit. She was standing with her hands at her sides, and she was looking at the man on the ground the way you look at something you recognize. Dominic clocked it first. Reyes. He said it like a question. You just going to stand there? She didn't answer him. She walked forward, past Sandra, past Dominic, past Captain Holt, and she crouched down about 2 feet from the man on the ground. She didn't touch him. She didn't reach for anything. She just crouched there, and she looked at him, and for about 3 seconds nothing happened. Then she said something. Nobody heard it. She was too low and too quiet, and the distance was wrong. But they saw what it did. The man on the ground went still, not unconscious, not passing out, passing. The specific stillness of a person standing down from a posture they have been holding so long they forgot they were holding it. His hand released Sandra's wrist. His shoulders dropped 3 centimeters. His eyes closed for 1 second and then opened and found Maya's face and stayed there. She looked at Captain Holt over her shoulder. I need everyone back, 30 feet minimum, please. Holt stared at her. Captain. Her voice was the same, even, not asking. 30 feet right now. He took a step back, and then, because the situation was already so far outside his operational experience that the hierarchy had effectively dissolved, he took another step back and signaled the crew to follow. Sandra retrieved her kit. Dominic retreated with his hands open at his sides, still watching. The 2 men in civilian clothes did not move back. The one with the radio looked at Maya, and something crossed his face that was not quite recognition and was not quite surprise. It was more like the expression of someone recalculating a problem they thought they had already solved. Maya was already opening her kit. She worked like someone who has done this before, not the careful, considered movements of a person running through a protocol they learned in a classroom. The efficient, reflexive movements of a person whose hands know things her brain has already processed and filed. She got an IV line into his right arm, the unburned arm. On the first attempt, no hesitation, the needle finding the vein with the practiced confidence of someone who has done it in conditions far worse than this. She assessed the burns with her eyes and her hands, touching the margins of the damaged tissue with 2 fingers, reading the depth and extent in the time it takes most paramedics to open their reference sheet. She talked to him while she worked, quietly, not the calming patter of emergency medicine training. Actual conversation, short sentences, specific words. He responded in single syllables, and twice he responded in a language that was not English or Spanish and that nobody standing 30 feet away could identify. 10 minutes in, she looked back again. I need a saline drip, a burn kit, and someone needs to call ahead to UC Davis for a trauma bay. Tell them I'm bringing in a patient with 40 to 45% NTBSA burns, full thickness on the left arm and partial on the torso, GCS 15, BP I need to check but he's compensating. Tell them I'll be there in 20. Sandra was already moving. Holt walked toward her. Reyes, what? Captain, I need the drip, and I need you to ask those 2 men if they have a name and a blood type for me. He won't tell me. Holt stared at her for 1 more second. Then he turned and walked toward the men in civilian clothes. The one with the radio looked at him steadily. Then he looked at Maya. Then he said something to his partner, who pulled out a different phone and made a call. 3 minutes later, Holt came back with a name, which was redacted, and a blood type, which was A positive. Maya did not react to the redacted name. She nodded. She went back to work. They transported at 11:22. In the back of the ambulance, with the noise of the road and the drip running and his vitals on the monitor showing a blood pressure that was holding at 110/70, lower than it should have been, but not in the basement, a body doing everything it could to compensate. He looked at her. How do you know that phrase? Not a question, a demand, but a quiet one. She checked the IV line. 14C Delta, 2013 to 2015. He was quiet for a moment. That unit was classified. Yes, she said, it was. You're a firefighter. I am now. He watched her adjust the drip rate. His vitals held. Outside, Sacramento moved past at 60 miles an hour. The man who taught you that phrase, he said. She didn't answer right away. He's the reason I know it, she said finally, and the reason I left. He didn't push it. People who have carried things know when to stop pulling. She watched the monitor. He watched the ceiling of the ambulance. The road moved under them. "You're good," he said. "I had a good teacher," she said. She said it like it cost her something. Here is what nobody at Station 14 knew about Maya Reyes. Here's what the gaps in her application were covering, and what the dead-end references meant, and what she had actually been doing for those 2 invisible years. She had been a special operations combat medic attached to a joint task force operating out of an installation in eastern Germany. Her unit designation has been classified and remains so. What is not classified, because it is a matter of medical record and personal history, is that she was one of 8 medics in a 2-year rotation that saw combat casualty rates that would make any emergency room physician sit down and take a breath. She operated under fire. She operated without adequate supplies. She operated with improvised equipment and limited evacuation windows and the kind of time pressure that makes a hospital trauma bay look like a spa treatment. She was 20 years old when she started. She was 22 when it ended. What ended it was a specific night in November of 2014. The details are not fully available. What is known is that her unit took casualties during a retrieval operation, that she was the senior medic on the ground by circumstance rather than rank, and that she made a series of decisions under fire that saved 3 lives and could not save 1. The one she couldn't save was her supervising officer, the man who had trained her. The man who had taught her the phrase that would, 9 years later, reach across a burning scene in Sacramento and stop a dying man from refusing help. His name was Chief Petty Officer Daniel Reyes, her father. She left the service 14 months after his death, not dishonorably, not under pressure. She submitted her paperwork correctly. She served her remaining commitment. She left with a record that would have gotten her a position in any emergency medicine program in the country. She didn't take any of them. She went to Sacramento, where she had no history, and she applied to the fire department, and she put the 2 years down as travel, and she kept her hands busy and her history quiet, and she did not talk about any of it. 7 months, 14 calls, nothing remarkable. Until October 14th, at UC Davis Medical Center, the trauma team was waiting. They had been told to expect a serious burn patient. They had not been told to expect Maya Reyes, and most of them had no way of knowing that the name would ever mean anything to them. The attending trauma surgeon was a woman named Dr. Priya Narayanan, who had spent 6 years in emergency medicine and had a polite professional impatience with pre-hospital care providers who thought their field assessment was the same as a clinical evaluation. She met the gurney at the bay doors. She looked at the patient's arm. She looked at the IV placement. She looked at the burn dressings. She looked at Maya. "You placed this line?" "Yes." "Pre-hospital?" "Yes." Narayanan looked at the line again. It was textbook. It was better than textbook. The placement under those conditions, on that anatomy, in the back of a moving ambulance, was cleaner than most of her residents managed in the controlled environment of the trauma bay. "What's your training?" Narayanan asked. "Firefighter EM&T, Maya said. Narayanan looked at her steadily. Maya looked back. "Get him inside," Narayanan said. They worked for 4 hours. The burns were serious but survivable. The 40 to 45% estimate Maya had called in proved accurate when they did the formal calculation. The IV access Maya had established held throughout the intervention and was still functional when they transferred him to the burn unit. The pain management decisions she had made in the field, which had been outside the strict protocol for a firefighter, EMT technically speaking, had prevented a cascade of complications that the burn specialist noted in his written assessment would likely have been life-threatening. He noted it in writing because someone had asked him to. The someone was one of the 2 men in civilian clothes who had followed the ambulance to UC Davis and who had spent 4 hours in a waiting room making calls on 2 different phones, and who had at some point during those 4 hours run a very thorough background check on Maya Elena Reyes. At 2:17 in the afternoon, he knocked on the door of a consultation room where Maya was sitting alone with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He introduced himself. He showed her a credential she recognized. "Your service record," he said. "Is sealed," she said. "We unsealed it." She looked at her coffee. "What do you want?" she said, not hostile, tired. He sat down across from her. "Chief Petty Officer Daniel Reyes, your father, his assessment of you from 2014. She didn't respond. He submitted a commendation report 6 weeks before he died, the man said. We found it during the review. He wrote, and I'm quoting directly, that you were the finest combat medic he had ever trained, and that the only thing preventing you from being the best he had ever seen was that you didn't believe it yourself. The consultation room was very quiet. Maya put her hands flat on the table. That's a private document, she said. Yes, he said. We know. We're sorry for that. He was quiet for a moment. Then he put a folder on the table. The man you saved this morning, he said. He's going to recover. Full functionality, the surgeons think. He's asking to speak to you when he's stable enough. She looked at the folder but didn't open it. He's also requesting, formally, that whatever position or resource allocation you need to continue your work, in whatever capacity, be facilitated. She looked up. He has some authority to make that request, the man said. It tends to get attention. Maya looked at the folder. She didn't touch it. My father's assessment, she said. The part about me not believing it. Yes. He was right, she said. I know. He was usually right. She said it without bitterness. The fact of it simply said. The man nodded. He left the folder on the table. He stood up. Take your time, he said. The folder isn't going anywhere. He left. The door clicked shut. Maya sat there for a while. Then she reached out and opened the folder. What Captain Dennis Holt did not know, when his rookie firefighter climbed back into the engine at the end of a shift 3 weeks later, was that the folder had contained 2 things. The first was a formal after-action assessment commending Maya's field performance on October 14th, signed by 4 people whose names he would not have recognized and 1 whose name he would have. The second was a program description, a new initiative attached to a Federal Emergency Response Coordination Office designed to embed specialized medical personnel with municipal fire departments in high-incident zones, with a specific focus on trauma capability at the point of first contact. The program needed a training coordinator, someone with combat medicine experience, someone with field trauma skills, someone who had proven, under conditions that did not allow for failure, that the gap between first responder and combat medic did not have to be as wide as the system assumed. Maya had read the whole thing. She had put it back in the folder. She had sat there for another 20 minutes. Then, she had called a number written in pen at the bottom of the last page. She did not tell Captain Holt any of this. She came back to work. She went on calls. She carried her gear squared away, and she did her chores without being asked, and she did not brag about anything. Ghost, the veterans still called her. Though the way they said it had changed, in the way that a nickname changes when the person wearing it has stopped being invisible. 6 weeks after October 14th, she stood in front of a room of 12 firefighters and 3 paramedics at Station 14 and ran a trauma assessment drill. She did not explain her background. She did not offer credentials. She simply demonstrated, step by step, with Dominic as her unwilling volunteer and Sandra Chu watching from the back of the room with an expression that moved through skepticism and ended somewhere near quiet respect, what it looked like to manage a critical patient with inadequate resources and maximal pressure, and the specific focused certainty of someone who has done it when the stakes were not theoretical. Afterward, Dominic stood up and said, in the straightforward way that 10-year veterans say things that are not easy for them to say, that he owed her an apology for the comment at the scene, that he had not known, that he should have trusted the situation faster. Maya looked at him. You didn't know, she said. That's the whole point. Sandra raised a hand from the back of the room. What was the phrase, the code word? The room was quiet, waiting. Maya considered it for a moment. Then she said, it was something my father taught me. It belongs to people who earned it. I'm not going to repeat it. A pause. But if you want to learn to do what I did for that patient, the assessment, the access, the management, I can teach you that, all of it, and you won't need a code word. Nobody argued. The program launched the following spring. Maya was listed as the founding training coordinator. Her name appeared in the program documentation. Her service record was still sealed, except to the people who had already seen it. The man she had saved was discharged from the U.C. Davis burn unit after 31 days. He walked out. Full functionality, as predicted. He sent her a single message, passed through channels she did not ask about. It said, your father was right. You always were the best. She read it once. She didn't respond. She put her phone in her pocket and went back to the drill she was running. There is a version of this story that ends with Maya Reyes getting a medal or a ceremony or a moment where the credits roll and the music swells. That version is not this version. This version ends with her in a training room in Sacramento, standing in front of people who are learning things they should have been taught years ago, doing the work as quietly and completely as she has always done everything. Because the truth is, and here is the thing that matters, the thing that outlasts any single call or any single dramatic moment, the truth is that the most capable people in the room are often the ones you have already decided not to look at. Maya Reyes sat at a desk for 7 months. She carried gear. She showed up. She gave no one a reason to ask questions because she was not looking for recognition. She was not waiting for her moment. She was simply present, doing what she knew how to do at whatever level the situation required. And when the situation required everything she had, including the most painful thing she owned, a phrase taught to her by a man who did not live to see her use it, she gave that too, without hesitation, without announcement, without waiting for someone to tell her it was allowed. Your past does not disqualify you from the present. It prepares you for it. Every loss you have carried, every skill you practiced in conditions no one else saw, every quiet year where you showed up and did the work without an audience, none of it disappears. It waits. And when the moment comes, as it comes for everyone eventually, it is there. The people most capable of saving you are not always the ones in the front of the room. Sometimes they are the ones sitting quietly at the back, waiting for a situation serious enough to deserve what they know. Do not overlook them. Do not underestimate the quiet ones. And do not assume that because someone has not yet shown you who they are, they have nothing to show. Maya Reyes knew exactly who she was. She had always known. She was just waiting for the right moment to let the rest of the world catch up. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the quiet people in your own life who are carrying more than you know, leave a comment below and tell us about them. We read every single one. And if you have ever been the person in the background, the one nobody saw coming, this story was for you. Tell us in the comments. We want to hear it. Subscribe to Emergency Heroes for a new story every week, stories of the people who run toward what everyone else runs from. Real courage does not always look the way you expect. We will keep finding it and bringing it to you. Share this with someone who has been underestimated. They will know why.